Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This is the first meeting that we've held in the Council Chamber, so welcome everyone. So the first item on the agenda is the appointment of chairman, and I will confirm that Mrs Fry was nominated as the chairman-elect at the County Council meeting held on the 19th of May. Can I ask that this is agreed?
I'd like to propose Mrs Fry.
And a seconder?
Wait a second, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs Fry.
Thank you very much and welcome to the first meeting of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee in the new council year. The meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website and it will be available for viewing after the meeting. This will be the first time we have been able to meet in person for more than a year. Due to the continued restrictions, we are limited with the number of people we can have in the room with us. Therefore, some officers who are presenting reports will be joining the meeting virtually. Can I please ask that all members and officers have their microphone on mute until they wish or are invited to speak? As we have a number of newly elected members joining this committee, I'm going to ask members to introduce themselves. I understand there are no substitutes today. Mr. Smith.
Good afternoon. My name is Mr Smith. I'm a County Councillor for Colville North.
Thank you. Mr. Haji Nicola. Mr. Hills.
Hello everyone, my name is Ross and I'm the County Councillor for Mallory.
Mr. Frisbee.
Good afternoon, my name is Mark Frisbee. I'm County Councillor for Melton Mowbray West.
Mrs. Newton.
Hello, my name is Betty Newton. I'm the County Councillor for Loughborough North.
Okay. Unfortunately, Mr. Welsh can't be with us this afternoon. Mrs. Lewis.
Good afternoon, Canon Carolyn Lewis, representing the Diocese of Leicester Church of England. Thank you.
Mr. Neil Lockyer.
Good afternoon, Neil Lockyer, representing the Catholic Diocese of Nottingham. Good afternoon.
We now come to item 2, the election of Deputy Chairman. I would like Mr. Smith was formally nominated at the last council meeting, but if there are no others, I would like to have a nominee. I would nominate Mr. Smith. And could I have a seconder, please? Now, the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of March, except for the officers, I'm the only person that was there. So I suggest that we take them as read, confirmed and signed. Is everybody in agreement? Show of hands, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've received, item 4, I've received no questions from members of the public. Item 5, we have a question. I've questions asked by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. I have received
for response 1, please. With over 750 children becoming eligible for free school meals during October 2020 and July 2021, this seems like an unprecedented increase in this cohort. What representations have been made by Leicestershire County Council to DFE to delay the change in the calculation? And the second follow-up is to response 2. In the original question, it was requested that the funding loss, which we now learn is almost £1 million in Leicestershire, how much can that be estimated per school? Is this available, please? If not, please can councillors receive the total loss for the schools based in their divisions? Thank you.
I now invite Ms. Jane Moore to reply to the questions.
Thank you, Chair. In response to the first question, the lead member for Children and Family Services has written both to the DfE and also to local MPs to raise the issue nationally. The issue has also been raised directly with the DfE department, or the department responsible for this, via the Association of Directors of Children's Services, and is discussed on a regular basis with them. In response to the second question, the breakdown for each school isn't currently available, and indeed would be a relatively big piece of work just to ascertain how much the each school would be have an issue by. However, if members do want to understand the impact for their schools, then please do let me know.
Is that it? You're happy with that, Mrs. Hack?
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Thank you very much. We move on to item 6. Any other items which I've decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda? I've not been notified of any urgent items. Item 7, declarations in respect of items on the agenda. Does any member have any interest that they wish to declare?
Chair, Mrs. Lewis here. I don't have any declaration of interest, but I didn't get time to unmute myself. I was actually present on the 9th of March. When you were referring to the minutes at the beginning, I was present. I'm not an officer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lewis, for making that clear. Sorry, I'll start again. As with all the following items, can I please ask members to allow officers to present their full report before asking questions? To indicate that you have a question, please unmute your microphone and I will call upon you one at a time to be sure that everyone has their say. I will finalise by calling on all members to ask if you have anything further to add. Item 10, the first item today. Agenda is a report on the wider impact of COVID-19, and Jane Moore, the Director of Children and Family Services, will present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report that you've got in front of you sets out some of the impact of COVID on our children and young people across Leicestershire, as well as how services across the department have managed throughout the pandemic. There was a report undertaken by the Association of Children and Young People's Health that suggested that young people had been less affected than other age groups by the infection itself, but have been disproportionately impacted by the social, educational and economic impacts of the pandemic. And in particular, young people who are already facing challenges in their lives seem likely to have been hardest hit. The report highlights in particular that there's also a possible slow burn impact of educational and employment constraints, and also the role of the pandemic is playing in widening health inequalities. There have been a number of surveys and conversations with children and young people to understand how the lockdown has affected them personally. And the Bernardo survey did highlight that young people had experienced an increase of mental health and wellbeing issues. The Leicestershire County Council policy team undertook a conversation with a whole range of young people and revealed a wide range of different experiences across the county. Amongst young people in care, there was a recognition of how much more chilled life was during the pandemic and how the pandemic had created time for activities outside of school. However, there was a widespread desire for the structure and social element of face-to-face teaching and hobbies, as well as the recognition of the toxic influence of social media, which has adversely affected many of their friendships. And issues such as support networks, mental health and wellbeing, and decline in young people's education levels were also identified in these conversations. The department does have a number of forums through which we seek feedback on an ongoing basis, including the Children and Young People's Youth Council for Leicestershire, our Children in Care Councils and our SEND Parent Carer Forum. And our local survey has identified a number of themes, including how children and young people felt about lockdown, how they missed going to school, how there was an increase in difficulty regarding talking with friends and also not being able to maintain peer relationships. They also talked about experiencing increased anxiety, worry and feelings of sadness, and young people identified feeling lonely. However, young people did identify that friends and family were their greatest source of support during the period of lockdown. We've then identified some specific issues for each of the service areas in the next paragraph, and also how some of that's been managed. So in terms of early years, in the first lockdown, childcare providers were asked to close and only remain open for children of key workers or those children who were vulnerable. In September, most providers did reopen, and from the 4th of January, early years providers were asked to remain open in that third lockdown. You can see from the details in paragraph 9 that our take-up of the 3 and 4-year-old fee and 2-year-old fee has decreased, and that the first national lockdown looks like it has impacted on children's learning and development, and providers were most concerned about the effects on children's personal, social and emotional development. And we've detailed in paragraphs 11 to 15 the further issues and how they've been managed within the early years sector. In relation to safeguarding, during the pandemic, work did continue with the Safeguarding Partnership, where they developed information and guidance for practitioners around how to respond to self-harm and suicide. There's been a further task and finish group established to look at how we respond to children with emerging mental health needs, so that pathways to services are understood and we've got consistent offers of support in place. The pandemic period did see an increase in contacts with domestic abuse as the main contact reason, and we have done some additional work to support the development of an enhanced offer to strengthen the pathway for families, where we are offering support services when incidents of domestic abuse do arrive and when social work intervention isn't judged to be appropriate. So where we can meet need, but they don't necessarily hit the social work threshold. In relation to our children and family wellbeing service, we have seen an overall increase in the number of families referred for support, but we did experience early on in the pandemic quite a significant drop off. So from April 2020, in terms of numbers of referrals. From September, when children went back up to school, we saw a marked increase in the number of referrals coming through. And the primary reason for those referrals was children's mental health. And those concerns, we think, have more than doubled in the last year. Typically, we're also seeing high levels of anxiety in children alongside low mood. And then finally, these, in terms of our early help services, the involvement with families has looked somewhat different. Some families have remained in contact with services for longer. And whilst we have continued home visits throughout the pandemic, we've also undertaken much of our service delivery virtually. So we've been doing online contact over the telephone, doorstep visits to drop off resources and other methods of intervention as well. And then in terms of our education input, the Education Effectiveness Partnership, which is a multi-agency partnership that supports the delivery and development of education, have looked at what issues children might be facing around catch-up in education. And you can see in paragraph 22, we've identified a number of key areas to explore. We've also undertaken a further survey to really understand the impact of remote learning on pupils during the lockdown and assess what the extent of that digital divide is. And you can see again in paragraph 23, we've detailed some learning from that. And then detailed in the final paragraphs of the paper, we've set out how the department has responded over the pandemic period. So we have continued to work effectively to keep children safe. We've also focused on and have managed to keep placement stability maintained at a good level. Staff have made some really good use of mobile technology to manage their day-to-day communications with children and family, and we're using virtual meetings as well. Children fed back that they really like the opportunity of using technology, and we've seen engagement levels as good over that period. At the start of lockdown, the department also coordinated food parcels for families in crisis who were open to the service. You can see in paragraph 27 the number of food parcels that we distributed and children supported. We've also seen an increase in dialogue with our multi-agency partners and continue to focus on the emotional well-being of young people in both specific COVID risk assessments for individual children, as well as in close liaison with our colleagues within education sectors as well. We've distributed 894 laptops to vulnerable children across Leicestershire, and throughout the pandemic, the Education Effectiveness Service, has offered advice, guidance and support to schools, and our early years services continue to support the early years providers, both in terms of the delivery of remote education as well as on-site learning for key worker and vulnerable children. We've continued.
Thank you very much. I think we all heartily agree with you in as much that the staff and everybody else involved in this department really stepped up to the mark so quickly and worked tirelessly through the whole time. And we are really thankful for all of them and all their hard work and the leadership. I have one question at the moment. Mrs. Newton.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you so much for such a comprehensive report. It was very welcome. In part of the bullet points, it says a general lack of engagement was more of an issue for schools than the issue, and not an issue driven by connectivity. I mean, that can be a real problem for pupils in schools, not knowing who to go to, who to speak to. And I just wonder what more could be done to engage, to get the schools to engage more with pupils and their families.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the major concerns post-pandemic is around how we ensure that children who need to be back into education are in education. So we have seen an increase in the number of children who are electively home educated, and we've also seen an increase in the children who are missing education. I have every confidence that schools are doing absolutely all they can do in terms of engaging children, and the department is supporting children to come back to education where it's appropriate and indeed where they can do so. I think it's an area that we're going to have to pay particular attention to over the forthcoming years. I think more than months, but certainly years, in terms of ensuring that we can get children back in, and where we're not able to, we look at how we can support them elsewhere. I think schools have over this period done an amazing job actually at engaging children. So we saw very high levels of high numbers of vulnerable children attending school, and we had high numbers of children of critical workers attending school over the period. And schools were also not just delivering the in-class and online learning, but were reaching out to children as well to support. But I think it's an area that we're going to need to keep a focus on.
Can I just very quickly follow up on that? I just wanted to know too, is there an age difference in terms of, like, say, primary school children and family engagement, or secondary school children? I'm thinking in particular those who are under stress for coming up to exam times, whether or not there's enough support going in for that particular age group. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, the support available is equal across the age group. Actually, what we have seen is attendance levels in primary is higher than that of secondary. Some of that's to do with the numbers of COVID infections, so there are children off as a result of that. Some of it's to do with where those children are in terms of their academic stages as well. But the kind of support available, I think, is equal, but there are bigger issues for in terms of numbers of children not engaging in secondary than there are in primary.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments they'd like to make?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to echo Jane's words about the staff that we've had here and all the staff in schools and everyone else who's been involved in the caring and safeguarding of our children and young people during the whole of the past pandemic. It's been absolutely fantastic, the response and how they've had to adapt and how they have adapted and continue to support our children. I just want to say thank you to Jane as well. She she tends to get left out a lot about, but she always thanks the staff. But her leadership has really brought us through this and kept everyone together. So I just want to put that on record as well, Chair. Thank you.
Entirely, I think we all agree that without Jane at the leadership and her team under her, we might be in a very different position than we are now, and the children of Leicestershire might be, and young people, should I say. Thank you very much. Mr. Frisbee.
Chair, I'd just like to say I think it's a remarkable achievement representing Melton Mowbray that we've not seen or noticed a remarkable increase in antisocial behaviour, which normally goes alongside available free time that young people have had. So again, I'd like to echo a remarkable achievement that we've managed to beat that down as well, or to retain that level. Thank you.
No, well, we'll move on to item 11, which is a report which provides a detailed overview, Children and Family Service Department. Again, we come back to Jane Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report that you've got in front of you provides you with an overview of the work of the Children and Families Department. And I won't go through it in huge detail because it's a big report and I'm sure you've had time to read it. But just in terms of a couple of points, the vision for the Children and Families Department remains as it has been for the last 4 years, that Leicestershire will be the best, or to be the best place for all children and young people and their families. And the department plan has 4 key ambitions for the department, that every child gets the best possible start in life, that children and their families build strength, resilience, confidence and capacity, children live in a safe, stable environments and have secure attachments, and that we help every child to have access to good quality education to ensure they achieve their maximum potential. And the services in the department, alongside a range of partners, work to deliver these ambitions. And the work of each of the service is set out in our annual service delivery plans. So the department does operate within a statutory framework that sets out the responsibility of both the Director of Children and Family Services and also the lead member for Children and Family Services. The local authorities, or all local authorities actually, are bound by almost 300 statutory duties in relation to children's services, and I've set out a broad summary of those duties in paragraphs 14 to 19, but essentially they cover safeguarding vulnerable children and young people, fair access to services and education excellence. So within the department, we have over 1,200 staff who work across 28 services and around about 107 teams. We've organised the department into 2 operational sections that are led by 2 assistant directors, one who leads our targeted early help and social care services, and the other who leads our education and SEND services. And the commissioning and business services are managed centrally via the director post. You can see a detailed structure within Appendix A that sets out how the service is organised. And then in paragraphs 21 to 85, we've detailed each of the services under the assistant directors. So under the targeted early help and children's social care, we have our front door to early help and social care services and our vulnerability hub. We have our safeguarding performance team and practice excellence, early help services, community safety, and our work with children in need, and also our children who are subject to a child protection plan. Also, we've got all of the work that we do with our children in care and care leavers, including our fostering and adoption services. And then underneath our education and SEND assistant director, we have our early years work, our work with children in school, and also our work with schools, our admission service, our school place planning and development services, and our SEND services. I'll leave it there, Chair, if that's okay, in order to allow for questions. Thank you.
Has anyone got any questions or comments they'd like to make on this? Mrs. Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jane, for your report. It's a really helpful overview. I'm looking at paragraph 19, referring to educational excellence, and you talk about working with head teachers, school governors, multi-academy trusts and academies. It would be great if you could also reference working with both the Church of England and Catholic Diocese as a strategic partner to support you in the aims of achieving educational excellence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lewis. I don't think that will be a problem. would
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and apologies to both representatives of diocese. It's entirely my error, and it's an omission as opposed to not recognising that really important relationship. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anybody else got any questions or comments they wish to make? I think it's quite a good report, this, because it does, particularly for a start of a new committee like this. Would you like us to take us through your annual report? And you have a completely new committee here for you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Pleased to meet you all. I'm Tony Barnard. I'm the virtual school head for Leicestershire Virtual School. You'll see that you have a report for the annual report for 2021 in front of you, which covers the academic year 2019-2020, but also the activities undertaken by the virtual school up until March 2021, to give you an idea as to what's happening currently as well. The reason why we have the academic data for 1920 is that obviously that overlaps into the current financial year, and we don't get the national details to compare them with until the following March, after the results are published. So those results have been included in the report, which was produced for today, June the 1st. I just want to say that from the point of view of the report, we report on the contextual data and the information regarding the number of children in care. And you'll note that we talk about 416 statutory school-age children being in care to Leicestershire at this point, at the end of July 2020. We're now up to 438, so it is an issue that we have a continuing number of children entering care every year, and obviously that's something which we have to accommodate with our work practices, etc. Also to say that the number of children with SEN, although high in relation to their general peer group, is pretty much in line with other virtual schools across the country. So where we have, I think it's 55% of looked after children with SEN and 29.08% with an EHCP, compared to all children nationally of being 3.1%. Those figures are pretty reflective of all children in care across the country. I will also say that across this year, this year's been like no others, as no doubt everybody is aware, that with coronavirus and the lockdowns, etc., and the disruption that caused to education processes, it means that all our children, for the last term and a half of the 2019-20, had a large proportion of their education disrupted, and you'll be aware of the significance of that in relation to exam results. And so the exam results that we have published in this document are not comparable with previous years because they've been arrived at by another process. But we have been able to compare it with national figures for the same corresponding year in relation to virtual schools across the country and peer groups nationally, etc. And so that information is being included in the examination results. I think it's important to say that we did work very hard to keep in contact with all our children during lockdown to ensure that they were being provided with appropriate education, and to find out not only were they in school or not, but equally if they weren't in school, what sort of provision schools were delivering to them to do at home. And so we were working on a weekly basis, keeping up to date with children and what had happened in the previous days. And so we had a pretty complete picture as to what was happening for all our children across that period. And again, continuing into the new academic year, where we had a similar situation, where we had lockdown during the terms this year so far. So again, this year's results are going to be affected by that again. Again, with the cancellation of examinations, etc. So we'll be looking at how that rolls out as far as the teacher assessments, etc. that appear this year. Just another couple of points, if I can. It's to say that the virtual school team has continued to deliver training across the year, and we are fully involved in delivering trauma-informed practice training right the way across the LLR, Leicestershire and Rutland initiative, because we have been delivering this sort of training for the past 8 years, and we have found those training sessions to be, very appropriate for the audiences that we have for them, but equally in relation to the CFS initiative to be an attachment and trauma aware service, we've offered ourselves to be able to offer that training likewise to people within the local authority. So that will continue as that develops. I mean, I'm happy to take questions from anybody. Should you have any?
Thank you very much, Tony. And also I now invite questions. Yes. I have Mrs. Newton.
Thank you. It's on page 79, and it's about really in terms of communication, in terms of schools and parents and how we actually manage to support those young people who, to some extent, they wouldn't call them looked after children, but children in need living in homes. What extra support can we give during the COVID times to that particular group? Thank you.
In relation to children in need, that is something which the DFE are looking at present as to how that cohort might better be supported. As far as the virtual school is concerned, the support that we offer to schools directly is equally as appropriate to how they support their children in need and those children who are not in care. But equally, again, those children who are previously in care, we offer support, information, guidance for any of the needs that their parents might have or the schools that they attend might have. It is something which, as I say, DFE are looking at with regards to how children in need might better be supported. And there is the potential there that we as virtual schools across the country may well be asked to have that service for parents and children in schools in the future. Of course, that's been delayed by the pandemic. Otherwise, we would have expected a response sometime around this time last year, I think.
Chair, if I may, could I ask, once we get a response and once we see a clearer and more fuller picture, could it come back to us as a committee, please?
Jane?
Yeah, sorry, no, just to pick up a little bit more, I think you were asking about what support's being provided to those children who are open to the wider service. So obviously the virtual school has responsibility for supporting our children in care. In terms of support to those children who are in education but live at home, who may well be subject to a child protection plan or child in need plan, there's support provided to them obviously by their allocated social worker, but actually the schools have responsibility for ensuring that they're okay in their education and are supported, and those schools have access to a whole raft of services, so may well make kind of additional referrals or indeed pull in additional support to make sure those children are well supported. But it's absolutely part of the plans that social workers have with those children to look at how well they're engaged in education and how well they're supported in education. And the responsibility for that sits with the school, but with also supported by the social worker allocated to that child.
Has anybody got any other questions or comments or would like clarification of the virtual school?
Leon. Yeah, Leon. You see, I'm looking at the internet, what is a virtual school? Can you actually explain to us exactly what is a virtual school?
Okay, the virtual school is not a school in relation with regards to the internet and being online, etc. It's something that came out of the 2014 Children and Families Act, which stated that every local authority must have what they called a virtual school head to ensure that children in care, any child in care to that local authority, no matter where they live or where they're educated, to ensure that that the local authority discharges its duties to promote the education achievement of children. So any child that's in care to Leicestershire, they come under the umbrella of the Leicestershire Virtual School. So they're not all in one school, they are in real schools across the country and living in different areas. But we, as a virtual school, have the role of ensuring that they have access to the best available education services wherever they are. So from that, I think the term virtual might be seen as misleading now, although obviously we do use the internet and for various numbers of our functions, etc.
It is quite difficult for anybody that hasn't had contact with a virtual school to quite understand it, and they really expect, I think, everybody in a room like this virtually having lessons or something, and that's not what it is. But so thank you very much for your question, and also thank you, Tony, for explaining it a little bit. It is quite difficult to understand at times. Mr. Frisbee.
Sorry, just to reiterate, late to the party with this one. So the children attend a normal, if in inverted commas, school, and the virtual school offers an umbrella to make sure I would suggest, colleagues, it's the fact that the word virtual education has been bandied around so much recently. I can appreciate my colleagues' confusion. I'm too as confused as he is.
So that's
nearly all education has been virtual for the last year. So between Jane and Tony, so Jane, if you'd like to come in and then.
Yeah, I think a really good point. I think because we've been talking about virtual education over the last year, we have a completely different definition now of what virtual means. But absolutely, children have got to be on a school roll. So all of our children in care should be on a school roll. Now, that might be in a mainstream school. It could be in a different education role that most parents would take. They'd meet with their school, they'd make sure that the child's school was doing everything they need. The role of the virtual school is absolutely to undertake that. So they have sight of all of our children in care and their education attainment, how well they're getting on. We have some money that we can add some extra activities to. So it's about us enacting our responsibility for our children in care and their education outcomes, essentially. But certainly it's not a school.
Does the virtual school actually provide actual teaching and learning, or is it like a register?
No, it's they may well commission some additional education, for example, to help individual children meet their outcomes. But no, they don't go out and teach. They work with the schools that are delivering the education. They might commission some activities. I mean, they do a whole kind of raft of things. It's phenomenal, the things that they do around enriching our children's education. But no, they don't go out and teach, as the teaching's done by the schools, but we may go in and do some additional work to kind of add value to the children's education programmes.
Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I think obviously very new members within here understanding it. I think once we have some training on the corporate parenting role as members are on the council, I think it will become a bit clearer as to what our role is within these children in care, and we become their parents and do everything that a normal parent would do if these families were living with their birth parents. So I think that will become a bit clearer once that training. But in regard to the virtual school, it might be good if members get sent out the recent newsletters. If Tony can send out some recent newsletters, we'll just give a flavour for members about what the virtual school does. I know they've been quite contained the last year, but maybe, some of the highlights of the year before and the activities they did might help members to understand a bit more of the role of the virtual school. So I'm sure Tony can send something out through Gemma for members.
Tony, would you be able to do that for us?
Certainly, and I would invite members also to have a look at our website as well. So that has got up-to-date information about what we do, how we operate, the activities that we've had, etc. So that would be a useful source of information.
Yeah, we have had some great events in past years that we've been invited to, which have been great. I've got a number of people now. I'll go to Mrs. Newton, then I've got Leon, and then I've got Brenda, and I've also got Jane and Mr. Frisbee.
It's just a little bit of information. I think there's something this authority actually, and I'm an opposition member, it's something this authority I think does quite well. We have corporate parenting, and we have 3 champions, one from each of the political groups, and we take our role extremely seriously. And we have regular meetings, mainly online at the moment, on this issue. So I think it's something I'd like to commend this authority for, because, I mean, my background is research into young carers. That was my background in university. So I can say with hand on heart, I think we're doing as well as it's possible to do in these circumstances. And not often you'll get a compliment from me.
Right. Jane, do you want to come in now? And then I'll go to Brenda, Leon and Mark. No? Doesn't do it. Right. Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. I know our thanks have been given to the staff, everything, but it's hard for us to understand, or hard for members to understand, what the virtual school is and what it's about and what it delivers. So you can imagine how difficult it's been for them over the last, 16 months. And they've had to sort of reinvent how they do things, and they've risen to the challenge with Tony's leadership very well. So it's just to highlight the difficult working conditions that they've gone through, and it's been very successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the explanation, and I absorbed the information and I just try to understand actually the ins and outs of this. But if I understand well, actually, the virtual school is about safeguarding that children will have actually the appropriate facilities for education. But if I may, if this is the case, I would like to ask a question. I mean, up in what is it? I think it's Thurgaston. No, possibly Bristol. There is a travelers camp, and these travelers are coming with small children all the time. So, what actually the virtual school is doing actually to ensure that these children will have actually appropriate education?
So if
I'll pick up that question first, because that's not a role, and then Sharon will just talk a little bit more about the role of the virtual school. So in terms of children who are part of travelling communities, or indeed other communities, we have a team called the Inclusion Service, who are responsible for what we call children missing education. And children could be missing education for a whole variety of reasons. And that team is responsible for making sure that those children are either on a school roll or indeed are supported to attend. And they may well go and meet with members of the community. They may work directly with children, or indeed work with schools. So the virtual school won't cover those children. Virtual school, and Sharon will just talk a little bit about the link with safeguarding. The virtual school is responsible for our children that we have responsibility for once they come into our care. So when children become our responsibility because they're in our care, the virtual school takes over. But we do have, and you'll see within the report on the department, we have an inclusion service who's primarily focused on making sure that all children are in education, and indeed we know kind of where they are and how we support them into school. And I'll just hand over to Sharon, who'll talk a little bit more about the virtual school bit.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Yes, so the virtual school don't have a particular primary role as in safeguarding children, as in a child protection safeguarding, but as all our services within children, they do have a role in the wider safeguarding of all aspects of children's well-being. And the virtual school's primary focus is the educational well-being and affording our children in care the opportunities to do as well as they possibly can within their education and learning. So as Jane and Tony have said, they are a skilled group of practitioners. Many of them have a teaching or youth working background, and they act as champions for our children. So they have that professional knowledge and expertise to understand the education process and establishment, understand what our children should receive, understand the legalities in which the schools operate and provide support and educational support to children. They can act as champions, they can challenge if necessary the schools, they can work alongside the schools to make sure that our children in care get the very best opportunities to succeed educationally. So they with a small s, as all of us, have a safeguarding role, but it's not a specific child protection role.
Thank you. Mark.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank both Tony and Jane for the detailed explanation. Somewhat slightly embarrassed, having worked in education for 25 years, I didn't even know it existed. So I'd just like to a very straightforward question, really. Does it follow the same rules and guidelines as the EHCP, the loco parentis offer? Is it there till they're 24, or does it stop at 16?
We support any child who is supported by children's social care. So that includes care leavers and also any care leavers who wish to access the support from the local authority after they've left care, so up to age 24. So, and again, it reflects the EHCP responsibilities. So we'll offer advice and information to people who are seeking to get back into education, perhaps later in life after they've left school, and advise them on courses, etc., and what they need to do to engage with education, employment, training offers. So it's right from birth all the way through.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tony. It might be an idea, as we have a number of new councillors now on the council, that if, as you can see from the discussion this afternoon, a lot of us didn't know about virtual schools until we got here, or a virtual school. If the newsletter that was mentioned could be sent to all councillors, because we often have substitutes. So I think that would be really helpful, and to see what goes on. I now have...
That's it. Thank you, Chair. My questions regarding point 7 is probably more appropriate for Jane. It says there's been a 32.1% increase in children in care in Leicestershire in 4 years, and we've already said it's gone up even more this year. Is this similar in other neighbouring authorities, and what are the main reasons for that sudden increase?
Yes, Chair, I'll take that question. We have seen an increase in the number of children in care. We have seen that to be slightly lower than our forecasted increase in numbers. We sit within nationally and within the region at a small number of children in care. So against our statistical neighbours and other authorities, we can stand very proud that we support, where appropriate, children to remain within their family or extended family setting. So the numbers have increased. Partly that is due to a forecast of the reasons why children may need to come into the care of the local authority, and in part is a result in more recent years about our offer and support to those older.
Important that they're up to standard and information. So I'll just put that offer out there as we go through. If there's anything that they feel they need more information, then we're very happy to set up some meetings for members to go forward.
I think that would be very helpful, and thank you very much. It is quite confusing at times, but I think I think some of it will become clearer too when we've done the training and briefing on corporate parenting and safeguarding. It starts to pull it all together. but please don't hesitate. And if you're speaking to other colleagues, don't hesitate to encourage them to ask questions. We like questions, and we like to, sometimes it's a question we've not thought of that comes to mind. So thank you very much. I don't see any more hands up, but I would like to thank Tony. Tony, hope to see you in, not on screen soon. Take care. Please pass on our thanks and appreciation to everybody that's working with you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. No, I will pass those comments on. Thank you.
Thank you. We now come to the final item on today's agenda, which is the Q4 performance report, which starts on page 87. And I'll turn to Sharon Cook, the Assistant Director for Targeted Early Help and Social Care, Paula Sumner, who's joining us remotely, Assistant Director for Education and SEND, and Stuart Smith, who's also joining us remotely, the Service Development Business Partner, to present this item. So, Sharon.
Thank you, Chair and members. Before you is the report on the Q4 performance report for Children and Family Services, and as been outlined, it's a report that's done in partnership with our colleagues in Business Intelligence, and it is the report that provides the key areas and indicators that we are measured against, and that's across the whole of targeted early help, children's social care, education and SEND, which is why, as outlined already, Stuart, Paula and myself are in the meeting to answer any service specific questions that you may have. So a strategic plan was agreed by the council for 2018 to 22. That's recently been refreshed. And we also, as a Children and Family Services, produce a departmental plan which identifies a number of ambitions and measures that we are monitored against to demonstrate our progress and the areas that we need to focus on. The one note to make to the committee is obviously this data and performance was in with a backdrop of COVID and the impact of COVID. It's measured, we are measured against our statistical neighbours and national figures and performance, and some of that performance information from a national point of view is ever changing and due to COVID. So that is sort of the health warning for members to consider. Paragraph 6 to 7 outlines the measures and our benchmarking and where we are in either the top quartile down to the 4th quartile. It talks about where we've made progress, where we've stayed the same, and any measures where we've seen a decline. Paragraph 8 down to paragraph 19 then takes you through in detail some of the key indicators that we are measured against in children's social care, and shows pleasingly where progress has continued to be made and performance has continued to be strong during this period. It does also give a focus of or areas where we are focused on, one being the percentage of children who are subject to a child protection plan on more than one occasion, which is a targeted area that's looked at by all authorities, and it's an area that we keep a close eye and monitoring on by auditing any children's cases. We have a close look as a management team at any cases where children have been on a child protection plan for more than one occasion to understand the reasoning for that. Paragraph 21 to 24 takes you through the performance of our youth offending service and where we currently stand as to any young people that enter the criminal justice system for the first time, any re-offending rates, and any youngsters who have been subject to custody. Paragraph 25 to 27 takes you through our early years performance, and 28 onwards to the some of the performance that's provided in respect of school and attainment. So that's the presentation of the report, and as I said earlier, both Paula, Stuart and then myself are here to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you very much. I think I am really bearing in mind what we've all been through. It's a very excellent report, and I'm very pleased to see the results. You know, most of the points that we go by, that we're assessed on and we assess ourselves on, are mainly amber or green, and we have no red, which is excellent. And I also appreciate very much that it is Q4 and it is really as up to date as the officers can possibly make it. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or wants any clarification or anything they don't understand or would like to see. I think it's just getting used to seeing these. We do use the RAG system as it's quite easy to understand. And I think it's very well laid out. Jane, did you want to add anything?
No, Chair, I think just to say, I know Sharon gave the health check around the performance, but actually what we have seen is a steady trajectory of continued improvement in performance. And I think, again, it's real credit to staff across the department and the ADs for their leadership of it, because I think keeping an eye on the performance whilst managing the pandemic has been a challenge. But there are still areas that we do need to work on and focus on, but really proud of the performance over the last year.
Thank you. I don't know if Paula or Stuart wanted to say anything remotely to
us. Nothing from me, Chair. I mean, there was just a point around elective home education that Jane did allude to in her earlier report, but just to offer some assurance to the committee that it is an area that we're very closely monitoring.
Thank you. And no one got any other further? Really quiet, well behaved. Stuart, did you want to add?
I was just going to add, and you'd already picked up on the point actually, that there is no red in the rags this time, and usually there's one, but I think in this report there isn't, and that's a testimony to the work over the year that's gradually nudged a lot of these indicators upwards where we've looked to work on them. So that part seems to be working well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And once again, please pass on the thanks of this committee and all councillors. I'm sure I can speak for all the sterling work that's been done. As there are no further questions or comments, it's just to remind you all that the date of the next meeting is scheduled for the 7th of September at 2 o'clock. And hopefully, all things being equal, we will be back here in this building and all together. So I wish you all a good summer. Enjoy it and stay safe and take care. And thank you all very much for coming and listening. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.